The champagne flute felt cold and ridiculous in my hand. Across the table, my wife, Sarah, swirled her wine, not meeting my eyes. The soft violin music in the expensive restaurant felt like a mockery of the silence between us. 10 years, I said, trying to summon a smile. Can you believe it? She finally looked up, her eyes not reflecting the candlelight's warmth, but something colder, harder. I can, actually. It feels like 20. The words landed like a physical blow. I set the flute down. Sarah, what's going on? You've been distant for months. She let out a short, bitter laugh that drew a glance from the next table. What's going on? Look around us, Mark. Really look. We're celebrating a decade of marriage at a place we can't afford because you got a bonus. A bonus that barely covers this meal. I'm trying, I said, my voice low. The real estate market is brutal right now, but I have a closing next week that... You always have a closing next week, she hissed, leaning forward. You're a real estate agent, Mark, not a visionary, not a leader. You hustle for scraps. You've been trying for 10 years. When does the succeeding start? The carefully constructed dam of my composure began to crack. I provide for this family. We have a roof over our heads. A roof my father helped us with. The car, my paycheck. Face it, Mark. You're a failure. A charming, well-meaning failure, but a failure nonetheless. I thought I was marrying a man who would build an empire. Instead, I got a man who can barely hold on to a plot of sand. She said it. The word hung in the air between us, more real than the food, the music, the other diners. Failure. It was the culmination of every sideways glance from her parents, every helpful suggestion from her high-flying friends, every time she'd praised her CEO boss, Alan Croft, for his ruthless brilliance. I didn't argue. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I just looked at the woman I loved, the mother of my 2 children, and saw a stranger measuring my worth on a balance sheet I didn't know we kept. I paid the bill with the last of my bonus, the paper feeling like a worthless token in my hand. The car ride home was a tomb of silence. She went straight to the guest bedroom and locked the door. I stood in the dark living room, the echo of her word bouncing off the walls of the life we'd built. Failure, failure, failure. But a strange thing happened. The pain didn't crush me. It didn't make me want to cry or plead. It acted like a solvent, burning away every last bit of doubt, every shred of need for her approval, for anyone's approval. For years, I'd played small to make her feel big. I downplayed my ambitions, my quiet successes, because they paled next to her corporate ladder. I'd let her believe the narrative because I thought it was love. I walked to my home office, a small nook off the kitchen filled with property maps and client folders. But buried beneath the paperwork was another set of files. Business plans, financial projections, patent applications. While I'd been selling houses, my best friend Leo and I had been building something else in the shadows. A proprietary software for commercial real estate analytics. A project we'd codenamed Ether. It was revolutionary. It could predict neighborhood trends, property values, and investment hotspots with terrifying accuracy. We'd bootstrapped it, nurtured it, protected it fiercely. It was our secret, our midnight passion project we believed in when no one else would. We'd been offered buyouts before, small ones. We'd always said no, believing in its potential. And their entire business model was about to be rendered obsolete. By us. Leo and I worked through the night. We called every angel investor who had ever shown interest. We used the one asset I had that Titan Croft didn't, an intimate, street-level knowledge of the very market he sought to dominate. I didn't just have data. I had the story behind the data. The money came in, faster than I thought possible. When people see a sure thing, they throw cash at it. Ether was a sure thing. Within 3 months, we had launched. Within 6, we were the darling of the commercial real estate world. Titan Properties stock plummeted. Their old way of thinking model was collapsing. I watched from the sidelines, a ghost at the feast. Sarah moved out, filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She was bitter, convinced my sudden success was a fluke, a lucky break that proved I could have done it all along if I hadn't been so lazy. She took a new job, a step down. She never mentioned Titan's troubles, but I could see the stress on her face during the few times we exchanged the kids. The end came quickly for Titan. They were bleeding clients, bleeding money. The board ousted Alan Croft, and they put the company up for sale. The day the news broke, I put on the one good suit I owned. I walked into the headquarters of Titan Properties, a gleaming tower that had once felt like an impenetrable fortress. I was escorted to the boardroom. The board members, older men in expensive suits, looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and desperation. "Mr. Evans," the chairman said, "we've reviewed your offer. It's aggressive, but given our circumstances, we are prepared to accept. I didn't smile. I just nodded. There's one condition. Name it. The current head of regional sales, Sarah Evans, she's to be terminated. Effective immediately. Her position is redundant. The chairman blinked, then nodded slowly. He didn't know who she was. She was just a name on a spreadsheet, a line item to be cut. Consider it done. I signed the papers. I owned Titan Properties. I owned the company that had fired my wife, the company her idol had run into the ground. I was in my new office, the one that had been Alan Croft's, when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was raw, shaking with a fury I could almost touch. You? You did this? You bought my company just to fire me? What is wrong with you? Is this your pathetic revenge because I told you the truth? I let her scream. I let her rage. When she finally ran out of breath, I spoke, my voice quiet, flat, devoid of the emotion that was shredding her. It's not revenge, Sarah, I said, looking out over the city skyline, a view she had always coveted. It's a lesson. You called me a failure because I didn't play the game your way. You measured my worth by a title and a salary. You never understood that true strength isn't about climbing a ladder someone else built. It's about building your own tower. And sometimes, I paused, letting the silence hang. Sometimes you get to buy the ladder everyone told you you'd never be good enough to climb. I hung up. I didn't block her number. Let her scream. The sound was no longer a knife in my heart. It was just noise. The failure she saw in me was always a reflection of her own limitations. And now she had a front row seat to exactly what I was capable of. Not for her, not to win her back, but for me. Because the man she thought was a failure never really existed. He was just waiting for the right reason to finally, truly succeed.